Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive. We're doing a cup of Super Bowl all next week. We kick it off at Costas on Monday. Bring canned goods, all for local pantries. Coldest week of the year. I have moved my Super Bowl radio row coverage to this week, and we've had just amazing guests. I mean, Joe Flacco has stopped by, Mike Nolan has stopped by, Jamal Lewis, amongst others. Lots of players, former coaches, Super Bowl champions. But I've really focused over the last couple of weeks as we played Buffalo and got into this on Hall of Fame voters with Marshall Yanda, Steve Smith, and Terrell Suggs all up for Hall of Fame. And beyond that, I miss my old friends since Chad Steele had me thrown out and blackballed in the league, and I don't go to New Orleans. But the other thing is, all my friends are old farts now, like John McClain and Ira Kaufman here. They don't even go to New Orleans anymore. They don't even get together and fight in a room over coffee and take pee breaks and do all that stuff that prostates make you do when you get to be a little bit older. He hangs out in Tampa. Dude, when you live in Tampa and you're from like up here in the Northeast, and everybody will hear that the minute you open your mouth because your accent it outs you a little bit. Why would you want to leave Tampa to go anywhere is what I would think, Ira Kaufman, you know?
My friend, I got back an hour ago from 9 holes of golf. 9 holes of golf, my friend. 55 when I started, 65 when I ended it. I parred one hole. I'm a happy camper. So here we go, Nestor. Now, a lot of talk in the Bucks last week with Liam Cohn. Interviewing with Jacksonville and the way he did it, and the Bucks couldn't reach him one day. So a lot of Buck fans are pissed off at Liam Cohn about the way he left when the Bucks offered to make him the highest paid offensive coordinator. But Nestor, you know this. There's only 32 of these head coach jobs. He wanted one. He wanted one in the worst way, and he got one in the worst way. He's working for Shad Khan.
Well, and Brian Schottenheimer took Jerry's job, right? So, and in Cleveland, there are places. Look, Tampa was one of those places. And before we go, I'm going to pull out my old, I've been collecting old belt buckles from the 70s. I have an old Buccaneers one here from 78 that'll kill you. The McKay era,
That's right.
but like you've been through bad times, good times, 2 different Super Bowl runs. You've had Tom Brady there, all of that. The Bucks are one of those little sleepy places that, Baker Mayfield goes down there. Nobody wanted him. I mean, you might have another Super Bowl there. That's a franchise that has done it a couple of times in a couple of different ways, right?
I think Buck fans are a little spoiled right now, Nestor, because 2020 is fresh on their mind. Vince Lombardi Trophy, Brady. But Nestor, I got to Tampa in '85. They went 2-14 and 2-14 my first couple of years. And
in
that
the
was
sombrero,
after,
right? Literally, right?
Yeah, that was after Doug Williams put the curse on him. 14
Look at this
straight.
thing. Look at how beautiful. Everybody thinks that's beautiful except Vinny Testaverde probably and a few others. But, I mean,
Look at that.
how could I not purchase this thing to wear on my belt, right, from 1978? So, but the Bucks are one of those franchise. They're not thought of like the Ravens or the Steelers, and it does get sleepy down there when y'all lose. I've been down there watching Flacco throw it around and felt like there were 10,000 people in the stadium. So there are other things to do in Tampa when you're not winning. And the Lightning know that, and so do the Rays know that, right?
And that's, Todd Bowles just went 10-7. Now, they lost a close game to Washington at home in the, wild card round. Buck fans are not happy, Nestor, with the 10-7. Even though you look around the landscape, they have a quarterback. 10 teams don't have a quarterback. Baltimore's got a quarterback. And I'm not putting Mayfield in the Lamar Jackson class, but you know what? He's a top 10 QB in this league now. 2 straight very good seasons for Mayfield. That's 241 touchdowns. I mean, that's one of the great lost stats of the year. 41 touchdowns for Mayfield. And Buck fans, they just have not rallied around this head coach. They don't like him. They want him out of here. And a lot of them wanted Liam Cohn to be bumped up to head coach and Bowles to get fired. How do those people feel now that these same people are calling Liam Cohn scum and a snake because of the way
that's the bar stool we've set up that our parents wouldn't have gone for any of that. And we had death threats here for Mark Andrews. And look, I'm a reporter. He should be coming out and speaking to the media, whatever's left of it, even though I've been thrown out. I'm not even there to ask questions. So there's an integrity loss through all of this for people of our era that we would say, it takes time to bake the cake in football. But I'll say this about the job thing with Cohn. I had a conversation with Jim Schwartz and Mike Tomlin at one of the owners' meetings. And you know the freedom of the owners' meetings where I'm there and friendships and libations are flowing and whatnot. And I distinctly remember being in a corner. There was another coach, another head coach there, maybe Rex, somebody else was in the conversation with us. And Jim had just
Could have been Sean McVay. Could have been. I don't know.
I think it was Dirk Cutter, actually, or maybe Jack Del Rio at that time. But I'm going back 15 years now, right? Schwartz had just taken the Lions job, 0-16, right? 0-16 job. And we had this open beer conversation late at night. And Mike Tomlin said to me, all these jobs are good jobs. You wait. If you get a job, you take the job. Schwartz said, get a job, you take. I couldn't get a man of that ilk to say, no, I wouldn't really work for Jerry. But Brian Billick, once he's a made guy, never went back and coached because he's like, I'm not taking a job with a lousy owner. I'm not going to do that. I don't need to do that. I don't want to do that. But along the pecking order, for every Liam Cohn that's gone to a place like Jacksonville and said, how are you going to make that work? There is a code amongst the coaches that all the jobs are good jobs, even if they're bad jobs. I think some guys that have gotten chewed up in that might disagree with that.
Well, Detroit, Nestor, was a dead franchise till Dan Campbell came around and turned that around. Look, here's the difference, and I think it's an important one. Head coaches, if you show anything at all, you'll get a second chance. You might have to wait a while, but you'll get a second chance. Nestor, if you're a general manager, you go into a bad situation.
Your career's over.
And you go 4-13 and 5-12, you're done, Nestor, and you don't get another chance. Usually.
You become an area scout. Literally, right? I mean, that's the next step down. With coaching, you get to go back and be an OC or a DC, and you can even go back to San Francisco and be Saleh and, put it back together again. Ira Kaufman is here. He's going to be voting on the Hall of Fame. He's one of my favorite people. In all of this getting thrown out and blackballed illicitly by these people in the league and what they've done and gambling, all the things that happen in the league, I miss people like you the most, and the people that have the wisdom that go in and vote on these Hall of Fame. So we'll get to Lamar, and I'll talk all of that, but let's talk Hall of Fame. How many years have you been voting? And there are 49 people. And when I went through my calendar, I realized I know half of you. And I'll have half of you on this month, one way or another, through all of the years. And I have such respect for all that all of you have endured. You mentioned death threats. He's a creep. He's a bad guy. You all got that when you didn't put Art Monk in the Hall of Fame 25 years ago. It's hard being a voter, and I do respect what you're trying to accomplish to honor the true history of football.
I got on in 2005, Nestor, so I've got more than 2 decades in, just about. I think it's important, and I'm not knocking, reporters that are 30 years old. But to be a Hall of Fame voter, Nestor, you can't start, where your first knowledge is people that played after 2002. I mean, that doesn't work. A lot of times a guy
comes up. This is my 1973 Colts belt buckle from seeing Marty Domrez play and watching Stan White sack Joe Namath. So, I got some street cred around here after 33 years of doing this every day.
You got to know who Burt Jones is, Nestor. You got to know who Burt Jones is. And
I had Joe Flacco on today, and he and I have been texting all week about every time I saw him in that jersey. It brought. That's why I have this out. That's why I went into this black hole of collecting these old belt buckles, because of my affinity for the Colts as a kid. Once you fall in love with it, even if they treat you like garbage and throw you out, you still love football. You know what I mean? I'm a football guy.
Speaking of Burt Jones, Nestor, and you know this, had he stayed healthy,
Hall of Fame.
He might have a gold jack. I'll give you another guy. This is going further back. You weren't even born. There was a guy named Greg Cook on the Cincinnati Bengals, early 70s. And Bill Walsh was on Paul Brown's staff in Cincinnati. Isaac Curtis was the main target. I think Bob Trump.
They were wearing these helmets, right? Like literally,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah. Okay.
And Bill Walsh was quoted years later saying Greg Cook could have been one of the all-time. He could have been a top 5 all-time quarterback. He hurt his shoulder, and he was never the same. So it happens, Nestor. Now, let's talk Hall of Fame. There's been a lot of changes. For instance, my first 18 years on the panel. We always met in person, Super Bowl City, the day before the Super Bowl, and you got to be there. If you're not in the room, you don't count. You don't vote. You don't do anything.
I saw Garceau get on planes and come in Friday afternoon every year and not sit in his seat at the games because it just in and out. But I ran into you guys because you always did it in the headquarters. You always did it in the ballroom. I would see you because I'm always working Saturday doing my post-op. I would run into all of you out getting coffee, peeing, Peter King, all of you guys. And I saw the level of, and all week long we would get together on Radio Row and it would be like, hey, we get in the room and we do it, and I loved all of that,
No question about it. So now it's on a Zoom call. Everything changed during COVID, and they haven't gone back to the in-person thing. I like the in-person, especially as a presenter. And I've been a very busy presenter since 2011.
Brooks, Lynch, who else did you do?
Sapp and Barber.
Okay, there you go.
And Dungy.
And
Ed Sable, head of NFL Films, founder of NFL Films. He was my very first one. 2011, I had never done a presentation, Nestor. And for a couple of years, I'd been talking to the guys, hey, how come we never talk about Ed Sable as a contributor? The guy put together NFL Films. It was a huge factor in the rise of NFL's popularity. It took over from baseball. And when he finally made the room, Nestor, as a finalist in 2011, some people from the board said, hey, Ira, he's not affiliated with a certain city, although you could argue Philadelphia with NFL Films. But they said, why don't you do the presentation? So I said, okay. Now, Nestor, this guy was 95 years old. He had one chance to make the Hall of Fame. One. That's a lot of pressure. So I talked to my people, did my due diligence. I had never met the guy, but I knew the impact of NFL Films.
And you knew Steve, right?
Yeah. So 2 days before Nestor, I was going to make the presentation. It was like a Thursday, and it was in Dallas. Jerry's Stadium had just opened.
And ice like hell that week. It was terrible.
Yeah. So John Madden was giving away some kind of an award, on a Thursday. So I went over there and I waited till the event finished and I went up to Madden. He goes, what's up? I said, John, I'm making the speech to get Ed Sable in the Hall of Fame on Saturday. Can you help me? Well, Madden's going to have a lot of clout in that room, just like a Belichick's going to have a lot of clout in that room. Certain guys count. And so Madden said, what's the NFL without its history? We got no history without Ed Sable. That's not a bad way to end the presentation.
Drop Nestor. The mic.
So not only did I use that, Nestor, not only that, but a little humor goes a long way in that debate room. A little bit of humor. Don't take yourself so seriously. So I told the story, Nestor, and they all believe me. I made the whole freaking thing up. And I told the story. Here I am. I'm 17 years old, Brooklyn, New York, and it's a Saturday night. And instead of going out with Muriel Berkowitz, I made up a fictitious name. There's no Muriel Berkowitz, but I said.
Was that like Fawn Leibowitz in Animal House?
There you go.
I think it was, right?
So I said, instead of going out with, I said, instead I'm watching the game of the week between the Cowboys and the Redskins. It stunted my growth. I'm supposed to, poor Muriel Berkowitz, she's got no date that night.
Well, my sense of humor, Sable was the one that made all the Football Follies films back in the 70s when the balls squirted around when I was a kid and This Week in the NFL. I revere all of that. So
the Autumn Wind is a Raider. That was a famous one with the Raiders. So anyway, he got in. Nestor, he got in. And
Steve got ill very soon thereafter.
Yes, he did. And the next day was Super Bowl Sunday. Well, the game was going to start at 6 o'clock. I get there at 3 o'clock on the bus. And I get off the elevator at the press box. True story. And standing there 20 feet from me was Steve Sable, who I had never met either. And he was talking to some guy. And when I got off that elevator, the guy said to Sable, that's the guy. That's the guy who made the speech for your father. Next thing I know, I got my work bag over my shoulder. Here comes Sable. He's already crying before he gets to me. He gives me a bear hug. He goes, Ira, you don't know me and I don't know you. But what you did for my family and my father, we will never forget it. We will never forget it. And his father was too weak to come to the game, so he wasn't there. But Steve Sable was there. You talk about an emotional moment. You know, they tell presenters and guys on the panel, don't let it get personal. But you know what, Nestor? It's personal. And when Scott is presenting a Marshall Yanda, it's personal because he gets to know Yanda and his family, and you realize how much it means to these guys.
I don't think there's any question about that. Ira Kaufman with a great speech here on behalf of the Sable family. As a little aside and for a little homework for you and for anybody in my audience, I knew Steve well. And Steve was one of those guys. First time I met him was in the press box in the stands at the Metrodome at the 92 Super Bowl. I was a fan. I was on the radio at that time, but John Stedman had got me 2 tickets because we thought the Oilers were going to the Super Bowl, and I had 2 seats on the 50-yard line. Trump was 4 rows in front of me. Evander Holyfield was in my section. I was sitting with Jimmy Jam from Janet Jackson's production team. So, and Nat Moore, the former Dolphin. So I met Steve that day, and it was larger than life to me, and I'm a media guy. And then Steve befriended me because I did my show at NFL Films and all of that. Steve would come every year and do the Super Bowl with me. He would sit in, and I have pictures every year, Radio Row, of him coming and stopping by. And that year, he said to me, I'm not doing anybody else. I'm going to do you, and I'm going to the movies. And if you knew Steve at all, Steve would always go to a movie. He hated the Super Bowl. He hated the pomp and circumstance and all of that. He just liked the game. And he would get there, and I bet I did 45 minutes of rambling conversation with him the day before you presented on that Friday because it snowed. Nobody got to town. And all my staff had left. And it was just me and Steve and my wife. We did like 45 minutes about his dad. And he talked about going to the movies and what movie house he was going, what movies he was going to see that weekend because he had to take his mind off of his dad and all of that. And he was a little slower that day in like the way, and then he got really sick really quick, and I never talked to him again. So I'm very emotional about it, and I'll get emotional about this because I want to tell you this story.
And he got in himself, Nestor. He got in. He got a gold jacket himself, Steve Sable, which I was happy about.
Well, I mean, incredibly deserved. But
yes.
You know what he did that really has meant something to me the rest of my life, and it would mean something if I was ever a part of your committee. A beautiful redheaded woman came over to my table about 20 minutes after. Her name's Marianne Wenger. And she was the assistant at NFL Films. And she said to me, and she had a Philly accent, Steve sent me over here. He says you know more about Baltimore football, that you should be the Baltimore guy on Top 10. And I'm like, Steve Sable said that I'm qualified to discuss the history of the National Football League on NFL Films. And I did NFL Top 10 for as long as it lists. And you can go back and watch all that. I'm one of the Baltimore funny guys saying little things. The only reason I was on that show is Steve Sable sat with me in Dallas that day. It was the last act of his life. In my world was to put me on that show. So I love Steve. I love your stories. Ira Kaufman, we haven't got the Yanda. Were you trying to avoid talking about Yanda and Smith and Suggs on me, Ira? You sandbagging me?
By the way, I've got a name for you.
Go ahead.
You better know this name because you've dealt with this guy. I used to work with him at the Tampa Tribune. He wrote a book on Tom Matte, and his name's Joel Poiley. Have you talked to Joel Poiley about his book?
Joel texts me once a week since we befriended each other. He's been on the show several times and promoting his Tom Matte book and his incredible relationship with Tom Matte growing up here and then his sports writing career. So, yeah, he keeps wanting me to send him to Sarasota to cover spring training. And I'm like, dude, if they let me back in, I've had my press pass taken away. The new ownership has honored the dark deeds of Peter Angelos. But if I get my press pass back, we'll all get together in Sarasota. I'll get Rick Vaughn to come. I mean, we'll make it a thing. We might even go to like an ale house or do something really Floridian.
I'll make a call on your behalf, Nestor. I'll make a call. All
right. Well, we'll see. We'll see if I can get a press schedule. So the 3 Hall of Famers up for Baltimore, give me a little criteria for you on these particular players, because I think there's there's a crowding issue when I find that Hines Ward's not on the ballot and Steve Smith's trying to get in and Reggie Wayne's trying to get in and Torrey Holt's trying to get in. And then there's I had Balzer on last week. There's this whole backlog and this backlash to the greatest show on turf that there's too many of them in, and Torrey Holt's paying the. So there's a lot of, I don't want to call it, I don't think it's politics. I just think there's a long line to get in. And I wonder if Yanda gets in quicker because he's a guard, if Suggs is going to have to wait longer because he's a Russia or because he was a jerk. I don't know. But like, you tell me. You represented Warren Sapp, so I got nothing to say.
All right, let's go over these guys, young man. First of all, you got some nerve, and I know you, and I didn't think you had this much nerve. Are you trying to claim Steve Smith as a Raven, that he should go into the Hall of Fame as a Raven? Is that your position?
Well, I think he added things at the end of his career that rounded out his career.
The man is a Carolina Panther over there, Aparicio, and I'm
they
not
don't
going
wear helmets in Canton. They don't wear helmets. This isn't Cape Cooperstown.
You ain't claiming Steve Smith because my friend Darren Gant wants Steve Smith for the Panthers. Now, all right, let's start with Smith. He's sitting behind Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne, and I'm with you on Hines Ward. There's about 3 or 4 of us veteran guys on the panel. We want Hines Ward up for discussion. We want him up for discussion. To us, he was a complete wide receiver. He was a hell of a blocker. He was a real football player.
He's a winner.
And he might not have the numbers of Reggie Wayne, but we want to at least discuss him, and we can't get him in the room as the finals. So we're frustrated. Steve Smith's going to probably have to wait, Nestor, but he's got big numbers. And I was at a game, which I think was in St. Louis, and it went into double overtime. And on the first play of double overtime, he caught a 70-yard touchdown. Game over. I was there.
I got a story like that that's crazy. Yeah. On my birthday, one of my best friends in the world, Julio Bermejo out in San Francisco, his wedding day in Mexico was my birthday, October 14th, and the Carolina Panthers were playing, and I couldn't go to his wedding because I cover football, right? Dumbass, I should have gone to Jalisco and gotten hammered on tequila, but I didn't. And that day, I was down on the field because remember last 5 minutes media could be down on the field, and I had a camera because it was the end, it was the beginning of the video era. He caught the same pass with 50 seconds left to go, some 80-yard bomb that came. He ran right at me to beat the Ravens with some sorry-ass Panthers team that wasn't even any good. It was when Delhomme was there, I think. It was in that era. But yeah. I'm with you. I have this memory of Steve Smith just winning games in a franchise that never won anything and would have never won anything had he hadn't been there. And I saw Steve do awful things to reporter. I mean, I'm like, for me, Steve had punched teammates. Steve did stuff that wasn't cool. Yeah. So as a football player, do I want to guard Steve Smith? Do I want to guard Reggie Wayne? Do I want to guard Torrey Holt? Do I want to guard Hines Ward? Hines Ward and Steve Smith were nasty.
I got a friend of mine. You might know the guy, Pat Yasinskis. He used to cover the Panthers for Charlotte. Anyway, he covered Steve Smith for many years. And he lives here in Tampa. He used to work at the Tribune, used to cover the Bucks. Then he went to Charlotte. And he says he wouldn't piss on Steve Smith if he was on fire. But as a football player, the guy's a Hall of Famer. And I trust Pat Yasinskis. He saw him in his prime. So
I don't like Terrell Suggs, but if you give me the choice of 3, Suggs, Smith, or Yanda, I probably have to take Suggs on merit, and Yanda has merit, and Smith has merit. But Suggs, to me, like of all the people, if I never see him again, I'm good with that. He's one of the humans that I'm like, it's good. That's how I feel about that. But you don't vote on that. I know you don't vote on that.
Let's talk about Suggs for a minute. He's sitting behind Jared Allen. They're similar. Suggs could be a little better, maybe a little better than Jared Allen. He's gonna wear a gold jacket if it's not this year. He's gonna wear it. He reminds me of DeMarcus Ware. DeMarcus Ware could have got in on year 1. It's hard to get in on year 1. Hard. Some people think that's the club within the club. And if you're gonna get in on year 1, you got to be Barry Sanders. You got to be Jerry Rice.
Well, there was one idiot last week with Ichiro in baseball, right? So, right, there's always one, right?
So, some people think that way, that there's a subset within the group of a first-year eligible getting in. You got to be spectacular. Was Suggs spectacular? Maybe, maybe not, but he was great. He was great. He's going to get in. I'm not sure it's going to be this year. Maybe it's Allen's year. He's been waiting about 5 years. Sometimes the guy in front of you has to get in, and then it's your turn. And that's what's going to happen with Antonio Gates this year. To me, he's the best guy on the board. Antonio Gates should have got in probably first year eligible, but didn't. But he's going to get in this year. Now, let me tell you a story about Yanda. And I saw Ozzie Newsome in the Buck press box this season, and great guy to talk to. I go, all right, who's up next for you, Ozzie? And he says Marshall Yanda and Suggs. Nestor, about 6 years ago, there was a guy that appeared on the ballot. I kept looking at him. He was a guard. I kept looking at him, and I kept saying to myself, this is one of the cleanest resumes I've ever seen. Unblemished. There's nothing to say negative. This guy has to go in. He's got to go in. His name was Will Shields. Played for the Chiefs. 14 years, never missed a freaking game. I don't think he missed a game. Uh-oh.
And a community guy, and a Walter Payton kind of guy, too, right? And Will Shields. I like dogs. It's good. I mean, the third dog I've had on this week. Jamal Lewis had his sit on his lap. It's fine.
Oh.
You can bring your dog in, as long as your dog's okay.
So, Nestor, this guy, Will Shields, clean as a whistle, never missed a game, 5-6 time first team All-Pro. Nestor, at the end of the day, it took him 4 years to get in. He's a guard. And Jari Evans was first year eligible last year. He didn't get in. We don't know what's going to happen this year. Guards don't have any stats, Nestor. They got no stats. Center's got no stats.
Let me give you the stat that I think of for offensive linemen. The minute that Matt Burke left here, it was a mess for Joe Flacco. I could make a case for him, even though he's nuts on the political front. The minute Marshall Yanda left here, and Lamar would be able to speak to this, it ain't been the same since. You know what I mean? Like the running game this year, DVOA, all that road grading. When they lost Marshall into that next year, it set the offense back 2-3 years for Greg Roman. For me, they were not the same offense in 20 and 21.
What I want your audience to know, Nestor, is Terrell Suggs and Marshall Yanda are going to have busts in Canton. Is it going to happen in the class of 2025? I don't know. Because when the meeting ended, Nestor, and it was an 8-hour Zoom call, it's already been done. When that meeting ended, they don't tell us who made it. They don't tell us because there's been too many leaks over the years, and they don't like that. So you're going to have to wait till that NFL Honors Show, which I believe is a week from Thursday.
I love that, though. That's great. It's good. I like this is one of those things where the NFL builds up, blows all the helium in to blow the balloon big. It's a big deal, and I think it's neat. And I think when they sneak up on the players and do all that, it's beautiful because
and Nestor, that is also the night that we find out if Lamar Jackson won another MVP award.
And now, you think he did, of course, right?
I have a vote. I am one of the 50 Associated Press voters. And by the way, there's a lot of all-pro teams. The Pro Football Writers have their own teams. Kansas City 101 has a team. There's only one team that matters, Nestor, and it's the Associated Press. That is the all-pro team. That is the team that you use when you're trying to get your guy into the Hall of Fame, that he was a 4-time all-pro. That's the one, Associated Press. They've been around 120 years. And as far as that's concerned, and then the postseason awards, comeback player, offensive rookie, whatever. All eyes are on the MVP. I think it's going to be tight. Is Lamar going to get his third? Now, I'm up front. You know me. I voted for Allen. However, if you look at me and you're a voter and you said you voted for Jackson, I have no problem with that. 0. His numbers are alarming. Here's my argument for Allen, and I think it's damn close. I think Lamar's got more to work with, in my opinion. I think his O-line might be better. Certainly, James Cook, as good as he is not Derrick Henry. So I think he's got a little bit more to work from. Buffalo had a better record than Baltimore. Um, and that actually hurt Baltimore, of course, in the playoff game, because if it was in Baltimore, could have been a different story. I didn't take into consideration. I don't want to vote for Jackson again. I'm not giving him his third one. Some people might have thought that way. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be very close. And the guy that gets squeezed out is Saquon Barkley, of course, who I named as my offensive player of the year. So, Nestor, this might sound crazy to you. I voted for Allen for MVP, and I voted for Lamar as first team All-Pro quarterback.
You're one of those guys that when it gets crazy, I'm going to blame you on the internet next weekend, next Friday night. Ira Kaufman is here. He's a Hall of Fame voter in Tampa. He's one of my favorite people. Papa Joe Chevalier, before he died, bet me a burned steak that I never cashed in on about the Steelers and the Ravens. So at some point, my mother-in-law lives in Sarasota. My team trains in Sarasota. It's too expensive to fly into Sarasota, so I always fly into Tampa. I always hang out there. I went to that shed and saw Air Supply over in Clearwater on the water. It was beautiful. It was the night that Peter Angelos died. So I was down there for spring training, and I have a lot of Tampa friends. Pete Williams, my old baseball buddy. What I'm going to do is if I get my press credential back, I'm assuming it would happen in Sarasota to put me on double secret probation or whatever they're going to do to me at this point. I'm 56 years old. But if I come down and I get a press credential back, I'll come down in March and we will celebrate accordingly with all of my South Florida friends. My ticket broker lives in St. Pete Beach. Rick Vaughn, I got a whole mafia, South Florida mafia. So I'll bring all of you together for a baseball game.
You better come down with your girl. You better come down with your girl.
Her mother lives there, so I got no choice. Yeah, I got mother-in-law in Venice and Nokomis, so it's all good. Ira Kaufman is here. He is in Tampa. Follow him. He is out on the internet. He's one of my favorite dudes. And by the way, big day today as we're taping this. It is the 24th anniversary of the first Ravens miracle, Purple Miracle, at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. So Tampa, I love you. I love you, Tampa.
That game was over before it even started, Nestor.
You know what?
What a rout.
I've had 15 players from that team text me today. That's how close that team is that I'm a straw stirring the drink because the Babe Ruth Museum put up the defensive play call card from the museum and credited it to Brian, and Marvin's pissed. So I've been sending it around to everybody today. So I'll get out on the social media with that. I got to run. Love Ira. Big week around here. Cup of Super Bowl coming next week. We're Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.